The call came at 6:47 in the morning, and something about the way Arthur said my name told me before he spoke another word that the day I had been quietly dreading had finally arrived. Ruth. His voice was low, measured, the way it always gets when he is carrying something heavy. I need you to come to Street Andrews early, not through the main entrance. Come around to the Elgin Street side. The door near the parking lot will be unlocked, and please come alone. I was standing in my kitchen in Nepean, still in my robe, holding a mug of tea I had not yet tasted. Outside the window, the October morning was doing what Ottawa mornings do in autumn pale light, cutting through the maples, everything copper and gold, the kind of beauty that almost convinces you the world is in order. Arthur, I said carefully, my son is getting married in 4 hours. I know. A pause, long enough that I could hear the church's old heating system humming faintly through his phone. That's why you need to come now. Arthur Kowalski had been my late husband Walter's closest friend for 30 years. When Walter collapsed on a Tuesday evening 2 years ago in his office on Sparks Street, it was Arthur who drove me to the Ottawa Heart Institute. It was Arthur who sat with me in that waiting room, who held my hand when the cardiologist came through those doors with the wrong expression on his face. Arthur did not say things he did not mean. He did not make dramatic gestures. He was a 68-year-old retired civil servant from Barhaven who drove a sensible Subaru and always arrived exactly when he said he would. I put down my mug without drinking from it and said, "I'll be there in 20 minutes. I need you to understand something about Daniel before I continue. My son is not a naive man. He is 36 years old, a structural engineer with a firm on Albert Street, patient and methodical, the kind of person who checks his measurements twice before he commits anything to paper. He grieved Walter carefully and completely, the way he does everything. He took a full year before he started going out again, before he let himself be open to someone new. When he first brought Claire to our house for dinner 14 months ago, I watched her the way a mother watches. She was striking in a very composed way, dark hair, precise posture, a smile that arrived exactly on cue. She asked the right questions. She remembered details from one visit to the next. She told me she had grown up in Gatineau, moved to Ottawa 6 years prior, worked in marketing for a nonprofit. Everything she said was perfectly constructed, like a sentence that had been edited before being spoken aloud. Walter always told me, watch what people do when they think no one is paying attention, not what they do when the spotlight is on them. Twice during that first dinner, I caught Claire's eyes drifting to the framed photographs above the mantel, the ones from Walter's firm events, the property award certificates, the investment recognition plaques he had been quietly proud of. Her gaze moved over them the way an appraiser's eyes move over a room, calculating, categorizing. Both times she recovered quickly and turned back to the conversation with a warm laugh. I told myself I was being unfair. Daniel was happy. He laughed at the table in a way I had not heard since his father died. Who was I to stand between him and that? So I pushed the feeling down, again and again, for 14 months. I became the mother-in-law I had promised myself I would be supportive, welcoming, giving Claire every benefit of every doubt. I helped plan the wedding. I wrote the deposit check for the reception venue at the Chateau Laurier without blinking. I told myself that whatever discomfort I felt was my grief talking, not my instincts. I was wrong to silence myself for so long. I will carry that for a long time. The side entrance of Street Andrews Presbyterian let me into a narrow corridor that smelled of old wood and candle wax. Arthur was waiting for me, his coat still on, his face doing the thing it had done at the hospital, that particular stillness that means something has already happened and cannot be undone. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "Tell me." He did not answer immediately. He guided me further down the corridor, past the choir room, to a small vestibule adjacent to the lower hall. A wooden bench, a single high window letting in gray morning light. He closed the door. 3 weeks ago, he said, sitting down, I was driving through Aylmer. I'd gone out to look at a property a friend was selling, nothing significant. Coming back on Rue Principale, I saw someone I recognized getting out of a car outside a dépanneur. I had to look twice because I was certain it was Claire. Was it? She was wearing her hair differently. No makeup. Jeans. She looked like a completely different person than the woman I'd had dinner with at your house. But yes, it was her. Arthur folded his hands. She wasn't alone. A man came out of the passenger side. Late 30s, heavy coat. They were arguing. She grabbed his arm and pulled him around the side of the building, out of the parking lot, away from the road. He paused. I didn't follow them. I told myself it was nothing. But it wasn't. I went back the following Saturday. I don't know why exactly. Call it the same instinct Walter always had about things. I drove down the same street. The same car was in the driveway of a house on a side road, blue Honda Civic. Quebec plates. I wrote down the address. He reached into his coat pocket and placed a folded piece of paper on the bench beside him, then a photograph, printed on plain white paper. I asked a friend who still has access to certain databases. Not officially, but he confirmed it. I looked at the photograph. It was a printout from what appeared to be a municipal record, grainy but legible. A name, Claire Thibodeau. A date, and beside it, the name Luc Thibodeau. Registered cohabitants. The address in Aylmer. Common law, I said. 3 years registered, Arthur said. Quebec law recognizes it after a year of cohabitation. They have a daughter. Her name is Mia. She is 5 years old. I sat with that for a moment. The heating system of the old church ticked and hummed. Outside, a streetcar passed on Spark Street, the familiar sound of the city waking up on a Saturday. Daniel knows none of this, I said. It was not a question. He cannot know she existed under that name. She introduced herself as Claire Beaumont when she met him. Beaumont is her mother's maiden name. Does she still live there? With this man? Arthur was quiet for a moment. I believe she has been maintaining both lives simultaneously. The man Luc appears to be in financial difficulty. I found a notice in the public registry. They have significant debt registered against the property, close to $180,000. $180,000, Walter's estate. The commercial properties he had built over 30 years on the south end of Bank Street, the RRSP accounts, the life insurance policy with Daniel as sole beneficiary. Daniel had signed over the survivor designation on his TFSA to Claire 2 months ago because she asked him to and because he trusted her completely. I stood up. Where is she now? I asked. She arrived at the church 40 minutes ago. She's in the bridal preparation room on the second floor. Arthur stood as well. Ruth, if you go in there now, she will deny everything and go straight to Daniel. And Daniel will believe her. You know he will. He was right. I had watched my son with this woman for 14 months. She had learned every architecture of his trust. He would look at me, then at her, and he would choose her. Not because he didn't love me, but because love had made him blind in precisely the way that love always does. Then what do? I asked. Arthur picked up the paper and the photograph and held them. You have the documents, but I need you to see her. Not the version she shows Daniel. I need you to see who she is when she believes no one is watching. Will you trust me for 20 more minutes? I thought about Walter. I thought about Daniel's face at the dinner table 14 months ago, laughing that way I had missed for so long. I thought about a little girl in Aylmer named Mia who was 5 years old and had no idea what her mother was doing today. Tell me where to go, I said. Arthur led me to a storage room off the main hall, folding chairs stacked against one wall, extra hymnals in cardboard boxes, a folding table. A narrow gap between the shelving unit and the interior wall gave a direct sightline to the hallway outside the bridal preparation room. The door was slightly ajar, the way old church doors always are in autumn, because the frames expand with the cold and never quite close fully. I will tell you something about the next 15 minutes. I have replayed them many times since then. In the quiet hours when the house in Nepean is still, and the only sound is the furnace cycling on. What I witnessed did not surprise me the way people assume it would. What I felt was not shock. It was the particular grief of being right about something you had desperately hoped you were wrong about. Claire came into the hallway at 7:42. Not in her dress, she was wearing a long cream robe, her hair already done, a small phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was different than the one she used around Daniel. Flatter, quieter, stripped of its warmth. She spoke in French. I grew up near Hull and spent 30 years attending federal meetings. My French is functional. Enough. I told you not to call before noon. A pause. Then, because it is my wedding day, Luc. Do you understand what that means? Today it is done. Another pause, longer. The accounts will be accessible within a week of the ceremony. Joint designation. I told you this. Her voice dropped. Yes. The Bank Street property alone is worth close to $400,000 in equity. That covers everything, plus interest, plus your brother. A short laugh, no warmth in it at all. Just keep Mia at your sister's tonight. I'll call you tomorrow. She ended the call and stood for a moment in the empty hallway, looking at nothing, her face completely still in a way I had never seen when other people were present. Then she smoothed the front of her robe with both hands, composed the expression I recognized, warm, graceful, unhurried, and walked back through the door. Before I reveal what I did next, I need to ask something of you. Comment the word truth below if you are still with me. I want to know you're ready for this. And please note, this story includes some elements shaped for the purpose of sharing an important lesson. But the heart of it, the deception, the desperation, the courage it takes to act that part is entirely real. I stepped out of the storage room. Arthur was waiting at the end of the hall. One look at my face told him everything. I handed him my phone and said quietly, "Call the non-emergency line for Ottawa police. Tell them what we have. I want someone here before 11 o'clock. Ruth. And call my daughter-in-law's friend Patricia, the one who works in family law. She is on the list in my contacts." I straightened my coat. I'm going to find Daniel. Finding Daniel alone in a church on his wedding morning is harder than you would think. He was surrounded Tyler from his firm, his cousin from Kingston, the photographer who materialized beside him every 40 seconds. I waited. I moved around the periphery of the gathering guests the way you do when you are buying time, smiling at the people I recognized, accepting compliments on my dress that I could barely hear. At 8:50, Daniel stepped away to use the washroom near the north vestibule. I followed him. When he came out, I was standing in the corridor. "Mom." He smiled, that complicated smile of a man who is nervous and happy and trying to hold both at once. "You look beautiful." "So do you," I meant it. He was wearing the charcoal suit Walter had picked out with him 3 years ago, before everything, and the resemblance was almost too much to hold. "I need 2 minutes. He looked at his watch. "I have to be." 2 minutes, Daniel." He read something in my face and stopped arguing. We stepped into the vestibule. I chose my words with the same care I had seen Arthur use. I told him I loved him. I told him I was proud of the man he had become. And then I told him that I had information about Claire that I needed him to hear, and that I needed him to stay still and listen before he responded. He did not stay still and listen. He did what I had known he would do. "Mom." His voice was careful, but I could hear the edge rising underneath it. "We have talked about this. I know you have reservations. I know this is hard since Dad. But she is registered as a common law partner in Quebec," I said. "Under her legal name, Thibodeau. To a man named Luc. They have a 5-year-old daughter." The corridor was very quiet. Daniel's expression moved through several things I did not have names for, one after another, too quickly for me to follow. "That is not possible," he said. "I know it doesn't feel possible. You are saying this because you have never fully accepted her. You have been looking for reasons since the first dinner." There it was, exactly what I had known. He would choose her. Not out of cruelty, not out of any failure of love for me, but because the architecture of his trust had been so carefully constructed that it would hold even against the truth. "I have documents," I said. "Documents can be fabricated." "Mom, this is my wedding day." He walked back toward the main hall, and I stood in that vestibule alone, holding everything Arthur had given me, knowing that the next 2 hours were going to change his life in a way he had not consented to and could not yet understand. Sometimes protecting someone means doing the thing they will be furious at you for. Walter told me that once, about a business decision that had cost a friendship. I had not fully understood it until that moment in the vestibule of St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church on a Saturday morning in October. The ceremony began at 10:15, the sanctuary of St. Andrew's seats perhaps 300, and every seat was filled. Afternoon light through the west windows turned the stone walls amber. The organ filled the space in that particular way, that old pipe organs do not just sound but pressure, something that moves through you rather than simply around you. Daniel stood at the front, and I will tell you honestly that he looked like his father at our wedding. The same angle of the jaw, the same way he held his hands when he was trying not to show how nervous he was. Tyler stood beside him. Daniel's eyes were fixed on the rear of the church. I sat in the second pew. Arthur sat near the side aisle, visible to me if I turned slightly. His phone was in his coat pocket. I did not look at him. The processional began. Claire entered on the arm of her uncle, and the room responded, the way rooms respond. A collective exhale, a softening. She was extraordinary to look at. The dress was simple and exactly right. Ivory, no excessive detail. Her expression was composed into something that looked like joy. She had spent 14 months rehearsing this moment, and she performed it flawlessly. Daniel's face when he saw her, I will not describe it. I will only say that it was the face of a man who believed everything he was feeling was real and permanent, and that it was the face of a man who was about to lose something he did not yet know he had lost. The minister was a woman named Reverend Chantal, whom Daniel had asked to officiate because she had known Walter. She moved through the opening words, the readings, the acknowledgement of the land. Her voice was unhurried, certain. When she reached the moment, she paused the way ministers do, a small, ritual breath before the words that no one ever expects to interrupt. If anyone present has cause to show why these two persons should not be joined in marriage, let them speak now, or else hold their peace forever. I stood up. The sound my movement made in that silence was very loud. The pew creaking, my heels on stone, every head turning. I have cause, I said. What followed was not the explosion I had perhaps expected. It was something stranger, a suspended moment, like the second after a stone breaks ice, before the crack spreads. Daniel turned toward me and his face was entirely wrong. All the joy evacuated from it in an instant, replaced by something I had no name for. Mom. His voice was barely audible. Don't do this. Claire's composure held for perhaps 4 seconds. 4 full seconds in which she simply looked at me with those measuring eyes. Then her expression shifted not into panic, but into something more controlled than that, calculation rearranging itself. Ruth. Her voice was warm and steady. This is not the moment. Whatever you need to tell Daniel, we can all sit down together after. Your legal name, I said, keeping my voice even, addressing her directly, is Claire Thibodeau. You have been registered as a common law partner in the province of Quebec for the past 3 years to a man named Luc Thibodeau. You share a home with him in Aylmer. You have a daughter together. Her name is Mia. She is 5 years old. The crack spread. 300 people shifted in their seats simultaneously. The sound of it was like wind through something. Daniel's hand went out to the side, and Tyler caught it. That is a lie. Claire's warmth was entirely gone now. What was underneath it was efficient and cold. She has been trying to find a reason to end this relationship since the day we met. You all know how grief works, how it makes people. I have the registration document, I said. I opened my coat and removed the folder Arthur had prepared, walked forward, and held it out toward Reverend Chantal, who took it with the careful hands of someone who understands that objects can matter. Daniel said very quietly, Claire. 1 word. Her name. The way he said it contained everything. Claire looked at him. And in the way she looked at him just for a moment, just the barest flicker, I saw something that wasn't performance. Something that might have been, in whatever complicated interior life she was actually living, something close to genuine anguish. It did not change anything, but I saw it, and I have not forgotten it. Then the rear doors of the sanctuary opened. A man in a gray coat entered, holding the hand of a small girl in a yellow sweater. She had her mother's dark hair and wide eyes, and she was looking around the church with the uncomplicated wonder of a 5-year-old encountering stained glass and organ pipes for the first time. Luc Thibodeau had driven from Aylmer. Arthur had called him at 7 that morning. I had not known this, and when I turned and saw them in the doorway, I felt the floor of the moment become something different underneath me. Daddy, the girl said, loudly and cheerfully. Because children do not calibrate for silence, there's Maman. She looks like a princess. 300 people held their breath. Luc walked slowly down the center aisle. He did not look angry. He looked like a man who had been carrying something for a very long time and had finally set it down, regardless of where he happened to be standing. He stopped near the front and looked at Daniel with the directness of someone who has stopped rehearsing what he is going to say. I'm sorry, he said in accented English, to Daniel, not to anyone else. You seem like a good person. You didn't deserve this." He reached into his coat and removed a small envelope. "Our registration certificate. And her identification. Both names." Daniel took the envelope. His hands were steady. I have always admired that about him, the way he becomes more still when things fall apart, the way his father did. He opened the envelope. He looked at what was inside for a long moment. Then he looked at Claire. "Say something," he said. His voice was extremely quiet. The acoustics of Street Andrews carried it to every corner of the room. "Tell me none of it is true. Tell me there is an explanation I haven't thought of. Tell me something." Claire was silent. "Did you love me?" Daniel asked. "Any part of what you showed me, was any of it real?" The silence stretched. 10 seconds. 15. Reverend Chantal stood very still, holding the folder, not interrupting something that needed to happen without interruption. Claire looked down at the bouquet in her hands. White dahlias and late-season cedar, which had been her choice, which she had been very specific about, which I had thought was beautiful when she described it. Her hands were shaking. She did not answer. That silence was the only honest thing she gave him, and it broke my son in a way that no words could have. 2 officers from Ottawa Police arrived at the south entrance at 10:48. Arthur had given them the exact time of the objection as an estimate. They were professional and entirely without drama, which somehow made it worse. They spoke briefly with Reverend Chantal, then with me, then approached Claire with the quiet courtesy that Canadian law enforcement extends even in situations that do not warrant it. The charge they explained to her in that low, professional voice was marriage fraud. In Canada, entering a marriage while knowingly misrepresenting oneself, particularly with intent to obtain financial benefit, carries serious consequences. They had also been in contact with the Quebec registry and were aware of the common law registration. Luke stood to one side with Mia on his hip. She was watching the officers with complete fascination, the way children watch anything with uniforms. As the officers walked Claire toward the rear of the church, she turned once. She looked at Daniel with an expression I had not seen on her face before and have not been able to fully categorize since. Then she walked through those heavy oak doors, and they closed behind her. Daniel sat down in the front pew in his wedding suit and did not speak for a very long time. I sat beside him. Tyler sat on his other side. 300 guests found their way quietly out of street. Andrews, some in silence, some in whispers, all of them doing the decent Canadian thing of giving a man his grief without making it a spectacle. Walter's friend Walter used to say that the measure of a community is how it behaves when someone is publicly broken. I watched those people leave that church, and I thought my husband was right about more things than I ever told him. When the sanctuary was nearly empty, Daniel spoke without looking up. "How long have you known?" "Since this morning," I said. "Arthur confirmed it 3 weeks ago. But this morning was the first time I had proof I knew you couldn't argue with. You tried to tell me in the vestibule." "Yes." He was quiet. "Then I would have defended her. I know. I would have chosen her over you." He said it flatly, not as a confession but as a fact he was examining. I was completely blind. "You were in love," I said. "Those are not the same thing." He turned and looked at me. And he had his father's eyes and his father's way of receiving difficult information, not collapsing under it, but allowing it to settle into his body without resistance. Dad would have spotted her immediately. "Your father was brilliant," I said, "but he was also human, and love makes everyone blind eventually, even him." Daniel nodded once. He reached over and took my hand the way he had not done since he was perhaps 11 years old, sitting in this same church at Walter's memorial. We sat that way while the last of the autumn light moved through the west windows and turned the stone walls a dimming gold. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now," I said, "we go home, and we let it be hard for as long as it needs to be." The fraud charge proceeded through the Ottawa courthouse over the following months. The Crown Attorney was thorough and unhurried in the way that the Canadian legal system can be when it chooses to be, which is not always but is sometimes. The evidence was clear. The financial intent was documented in Claire's own messages, retrieved from her phone with proper authorization. Luke cooperated fully. His own culpability was less than Claire's, and the Crown reflected that in how they proceeded. He had known about the plan but had not designed it, and his terror about their debt had been real enough to drive him to allow something he should have stopped. Claire was sentenced in February to 2 years less a day, to be served in the community with strict conditions, plus full restitution of the TFSA designation she had obtained from Daniel. The sentence was, in the language of the courtroom, appropriate to the circumstances. In the language of a mother, it was justice. I do not wish her suffering. I wish her the long, uncomfortable work of becoming someone who does not do this to people. Mia is living with Luke's parents in Aylmer, while Luke stabilizes his finances. I sent her a birthday gift in December, a book of Canadian animal stories with illustrations, through a mutual arrangement Arthur quietly organized. She is not responsible for any of this. She never was. I helped with the legal costs Luke could not cover. Walter would have done the same. When you have enough, and someone innocent is drowning through no fault of their own, you extend a hand. It is not complicated. On a Thursday afternoon in March, Daniel came to my house for dinner. He arrived exactly on time, the way he always does, and he brought Tim Hortons Timbits, because he has been bringing me Timbits since he was 9 years old, and some things, thank God, do not change. He looked better. Not healed, that is a longer road, and we both knew it, but lighter. Less like someone bracing for an impact that had already come. After dinner, we sat in the living room with tea. On the mantel above the fireplace, Walter's photographs looked out at us. I've been seeing someone, Daniel said. He said it carefully, the way you handle something that might be delicate. A colleague. She's been a friend for 2 years. It's very early. I'm not rushing anything. You don't have to explain yourself to me, I said. I know. He looked at his tea. I just wanted you to know. She knows what happened. I told her everything. He paused. She asked to meet you. I told her you're the person whose judgment I trust the most. That took me a moment to receive properly. I ignored my instincts for 14 months, I said. I'm not sure that qualifies me as reliable. You acted on them when it mattered, Daniel said. That's what Dad always said about you. He said, Ruth will always come through when it actually counts. I looked at Walter's photograph on the mantel. The one from Kingston, the summer before the business really took off, when we were young and not yet certain of anything except each other. I thought, I know. I did what you would have asked me to do. I stood up when standing up was the harder thing. Arthur comes for dinner on Sundays now. He sits in Walter's chair and complains about the Senators, with the same energy he has always applied to that particular hobby, and I think he has earned every warm room and shared meal that remains. He has been family longer than he has been a friend, which is the most honest category there is. They say a mother's instinct is not magic. I agree with that. It is not mystical or supernatural. It is simply the accumulated knowledge of loving someone for a very long time and paying attention while you do it. It does not make you infallible. I was silent for 14 months when I should have been asking questions. I carry that. But when the moment came, I did not stay silent. And sometimes, when everything is at stake, that is the only thing that matters. If this story reached you somewhere true, if it reminded you of someone you love and the quiet voice you have been talking yourself out of, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment and tell me. Have you ever had to do the hard thing to protect someone who wasn't ready to be protected? Those stories matter, every single one of them. Proverbs 11:3 tells us that integrity guides the upright, but the crookedness of the treacherous destroys them. Claire Thibodeau built her plan on the conviction that no one was watching carefully enough. She was wrong about that by exactly one person. Trust what you know, protect the people you love, and never mistake silence for safety, because sometimes the bravest sentence you will ever speak is the one that shatters the most beautiful lie in the room.